We'll do the intro. There's a few people coming in now. All right, I might get a start, Joe. So welcome everyone to Build or Declare Australia's 15th webinar. Today's webinar is going to be on hempcrete. My name is Hamish White and I'm one of the founding members of Builders Declare and Director of Sanctum Homes, and I'll be your host for this evening. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today. I would like to also pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. As I just mentioned, today's webinar is on the magical building material that is hemp. I'm just going to give a bit of a brief introduction to what hemp actually is and our guest today, and then I'll throw over to Joe, who's going to provide us with a small presentation. Industrial hemp is a variety of the cannabis sativa plant species that is grown specifically for a range of commercial purposes, including paper, fabric, clothing, biodegradable plastics, paint, insulation, biofuel, food, and animal feed. It is typically found in the Northern Hemisphere and is one of the fastest growing plants. Its use as fibre dates back 10,000 years when it was originally spun into textiles. Hemp has the ability to absorb substantial levels of carbon dioxide during its rapid growing cycle. When you build with hemp, you are actively capturing and storing carbon for the life of the building. To tell us more about this exciting product, we are joined by the hemp expert of Australia, Joe Diallo from the Hemp Building Company. In 2006, Joe made a career change, became a registered builder. Following his heart, he shifted across into using more natural building methods, including rammed earth, straw bale, and later building his first hempcrete house. One project led to another, and he soon became nationally recognised as a specialist in hempcrete construction, and has since provided his valuable knowledge and skills in implementing hempcrete into countless projects across Australia. Joe came across hemp and lime building in about 2000 while reading an article about the use of this wonderful biocomposite in the restoration of historic Wattle and Daub building. Now, Joe, did I pronounce that right?
Daub. Daub is...
Daub.
Yeah.
Daub building in France, sorry. The article also mentioned the equally successful use of the material on several new housing projects. This was indeed the light bulb moment for Joe in having a deep understanding of the behaviour and benefits of using natural plant-based materials in building homes. It seemed that hempcrete ticked all the boxes. I just got a chat here saying that my internet might be sketchy. Just letting everybody know that this is recorded, so hopefully everyone is hearing me a-okay. I will continue with the intro, but I just wanted to let everybody know that it is recorded just in case this internet is sketchy. Joe's first hempcrete project was in 2011 when he both designed and built a 2-storey loft cottage. The material and equipment were incredibly difficult to source, and this was the first hempcrete house in Victoria. There was no how-to manual and everything had to be learned on the way. It's sort of reminiscent of our certified passive hempcrete house, Joe. Several mistakes were made during the project, which only added to Joe's knowledge in understanding and experience of building with hempcrete. Looking to the future of hempcrete in Australia, Joe has a clear view of the next evolution of hempcrete and the many spin-off opportunities. And I'm really excited about this because I'm hoping, Joe, you're going to touch on them. However, a critical aspect to making this viable is the need to commercialise industrial hemp cultivation. Joe recently presented to the Western Murray Land Improvement Group to emphasise and promote the benefits of this product, as it is crucial in justifying the large investment required in setting up an Australian manufacturing plant and distribution network. Today's sponsor is proudly brought to you by Gruen Eco Design. As a few of you may know, Joe, myself and Gruen have partnered up on one of our current projects. to build, hopefully, what is Australia's first certified hempcrete passive house. Gruen Eco's mission is to make energy efficient and sustainable buildings a staple in the Australian landscape. If you're interested in learning more about how Gruen Ecos can help you with your own hempcrete house, please don't hesitate to call Simone on 0430 389 739. And you can get in contact with them via their website, gruenecodesign.com. All right, the information you're about to receive is based on the experiences of the presenters and may not relate to you or your situation. If you'd like more specific advice, please get in touch with us via email. Now, today's webinar is going to go for about 45 to 50 minutes. We've already got a few questions that we have received throughout the last 3 or 4 days, which we'll touch on at the end. But we'll give you an opportunity to answer any or ask any questions, which we'll fire at Joe at the end of the presentation. Please put all your questions in the Q&A box down the bottom of the screen. All right, Joe, I will throw over to you. I'm assuming you've still got your screen sharing capabilities, so yep. I will throw over to you.
Thank you, Hamish, for that wonderful intro. And yes, thank you to Gruen Eco for providing this opportunity, and Builders Declare, which I thank you too, Hamish, on setting that up many years ago. Yeah, look, I've got a presentation that I'll put together for today, and we'll run through that. We've learnt it's a little bit east meets west with this particular project, and you know, I think when we set out in the early days with planning this job, you know, I guess we had some cross-section drawings that we provided at the early stage, but it wasn't until you know, the high level of this project that we realised that we had to really you know, introduce some new concepts and some new drawings, which Hamish and his team were behind, and that was backed up by Gruen Eco. So yeah, look, as I don't need to go into more about the benefits of hemp. They're pretty well known. I guess a lot of you have already done that research. Someone out there has already counted 25,000 uses for hemp and related products. And I guess today's talk is really focusing on building, and that's what I'm interested in. So I wanted to really talk about the typical customer. I've got sort of 3 or 4 different clients that we've had over time, and I think what I'm trying to show is a bit of a pattern of who that customer base is, which is growing in terms of I think we're getting a lot more mainstream people looking at this material as a real option. So Jane and David, I'll start off with them, built almost identical houses in Newstead, small parcel or small footprint, 64 square metres each. And they were really interested in a thermally performing house. They weren't necessarily chasing passive house, but they did really want to achieve a high thermal performance, particularly in the changing climate. And so Jane and David are both from the retired couple from the corporate world. And during the day they come together, and at night they take away into their nice warm abodes. So yeah, that was a really terrific project. Like I said, we weren't chasing certification, but Jane did have an air exchange test done there, and they were very happy with 1.5 and 2 respectively for the 2 properties. So the next customer I'd like to chat about is Sue, another sort of in the corporate world. She runs her own legal practice, focusing on work cover related issues. And yeah, she was wanting to build her own house to escape the rigors of the busy life in the city. And eventually she will retire out there in the Hepburn area. 3-bedroom house, and she really wanted to tackle the project, and it had done all the research. You know, she knew the credibility of Hempcrete. And then we talk about Marge in Mount Beauty, who you know, beat cancer. She's a long-time school teacher, and she managed to do a deal with VCE students that when the time came to build her house, she would provide free tuition if they were able to provide the labour workforce. And of course, you know, while we're talking about this wonderful Cambia project, you know, I really need to mention, you know, Nelson and Mandy, who really drove this from the start. And if it wasn't for their determination to chase this, because they probably did have a lot of people that were, I guess, trying to, you know, steer them in a different direction. But they, their determination was quite inspiring. And here we are, you know, we're now finding all this interest about this particular project, which is well and truly in its, you know, in its sort of middle stages, middle to the sort of 3/4 of the way through. What I've found in the 12 years that I've been working in this particular field is that there's a strong, constant theme coming through. The common denominator that ties all these people together is a real strong sustainability drive. And I mentioned that with credibility to the word sustainability, which can sometimes be greenwashed. And also what comes through is this desire to build a healthy home. So a healthy home also means a healthy planet. And really particularly so is the desire to change the status quo. So those are, yeah, I mean, the products are, you know, they're looking for that credibility with sustainability, non-toxic and healthy home. Having operated in this area for, you know, about 12 years, and many of you have probably done your own research, but the green building movement is an inevitable trend. There's lots of research papers out there that are showing that, you know, that green consumer is becoming stronger and more demanding and wanting change. And that's what we're, as I said, we're seeing now that there is a lot more mainstream customers coming on board. You know, it's not just this hippie thing that yeah, it's probably started off that way, but it's a real credible high performance building solution. The predominant way that we build, I mean, and this is probably across the world, is what we refer to as cast in situ. Cast in situ is just essentially using a formwork system to build the walls, the Hempcrete walls, between 250 to 300 millimeters thick from the ground up to the top plate. The advantages with building in cast in situ is that we do build with a conventional timber or steel frame, which is quite well known in the industry. And in doing so, you do get this lovely tight seal. As you're building the walls from the ground up, you're getting really nice tight seals against those windows and doors, which creates the sort of a high thermal and acoustic performance. And you know, that cast in situ, it will take any shape. It just depends on the way that you set up your formwork. We've done waves, we've done rounded reveals, and we're at a project on the books at the moment, which is a completely circular house. And look, yeah, there are the disadvantages are really it has got a high labour input, which will, you know, reflect towards a higher building cost because you've got that high labour, which means your labour input is going to be higher, but not too much higher. I think, you know, if we look at if you build a standard brick veneer house and you build a Hempcrete house simple design, you're probably going to be about 20% more with the hempcrete house. And then you've got this, it's not so much a disadvantage, but you've got to allow the walls to breathe, to dry before you can render the walls. I have been an advocate about the fact that we don't really have specific hempcrete building standards in this country. And I show this photo for a reason. You've got those two bags in the background, and both of them are 500, well, half a kilo each. Now, you'll see that the volume in the bag on the right-hand side, as you see the screen, is obviously bigger volume. And so this is the type of hemp hurd. So the hemp hurd is the woody core after the fiber's been stripped from the industrial hemp plant. You get that woody core. And we like to see an aggregate size of between 5 and 25 mil. And in doing so, you get this lovely honeycomb structure with all those little air pockets which provide the thermal resistance. The bag on the right is from what we refer to a fibre crop, which grows to about 4 to 5 metres and really quickly. So as Hamish mentioned, I'm working with Western Murray Land Improvement Group, a bunch of farmers up there that are transitioning from, farming practices that no longer work, including dairy, and they are seriously looking at industrial hemp. So the bag on the, and this is the type of cultivar, the bag on the right, which is what they'll be growing in. They've got a trial crop at the moment, which will be harvested in a few weeks, and then look at really ramping that up as into the next growing season. The bag on the left is from a smaller variety, which probably tends to grow to about 170 centimetres tall, so 5 foot in the old standards, and you can see how the fibre is finer. So I guess you can probably play into that your thermal performance is probably going to be different in those two specimens. I also want to add that part of the standards is that hempcrete was always designed as an overall system, and what I mean by that is to achieve the optimum thermal and acoustic performance, it does require a render. Now we render on the inside, you can apply lime or clay-based render. And if you've got an external hempcrete wall, that will need to be rendered as well. And that will provide the compliance for weatherproofing in that building standards. And just talking about render, there are literally hundreds of different textures and finishes and colours that you can apply. I'm a man that just loves a line render. It's just got so many different attributes that you can provide and provide that lovely aesthetic appeal. So this is a project we did near Canberra about March last year. This is Ruth, who is 80 years old. She lost her previous home to an electrical fire in the house, which burnt the entire house, and so she was able to rebuild. You'll probably notice in that photo that we've got the frame on the outside, which means that will be cladded with a timber cladding, and all the hempcrete is on the inside. We've got, you might see there too in the foreground, a couple of blocks in the bottom of the wall, which are for our skirting board. We generally box out the doors and windows with form ply. We take a datum from the external side and mark a line on the inside, and we run to that line. And then once we're finished, the form work gets all stripped away and the doors and windows get installed afterwards. We'll talk about Cambia in a little while, because in that particular project, the windows and doors were installed, or at least the frames were installed before we did the hempcrete walls. So in that time that we've been working with hempcrete, we've developed just efficiencies all the way through, just to try and make things a lot quicker and flow better. So these days, what we tend to do is provide full formwork sheets on the outside, and you'll see in that photo you've got a screw, a long batten screw that provides the datum point between for the thickness of the wall, and then a secondary screw will be penetrated from the outside of that formwork and tightened up against the stud, and that's enough for us to get the hempcrete in. The hempcrete is very light; it won't blow out. That's all you really need. And then on the inside, where generally you've got a flat surface, which is obviously safer to work from, we'll run these timber L brackets, which we make from just waste timber on site. So as we move up the wall, those brackets get removed, which is just temporarily screwed into the frame, and we move upwards in that fashion. So this is a photo of Cambia down on the ground level. You'll notice the steel shroud around that, which was a real winner. We used this for the first time on this project. The only thing I'll add to that with the shroud is that in future, we'll probably just look at just 2 verticals and an upper section, and probably do a rendered seal at the base. You'll notice there's a bit of a cutout in the formwork. Because you're working with the hempcrete from the top down, when you get to that, when you get something that you have to work with sort of horizontally, it doesn't sort of work that well. So in future projects, we'll look at having that no sill, so as we can get that hempcrete packed from in a vertical motion. So this is the other side of that window, and this is how the Sanctum boys set up the tape and really apply that seal at that frame stage. And you'll see our formwork, the L brackets, the double screw on the other side. This is a window further down the house on the back wall. Hamish, you might want to explain. I can't remember the fixing blocks that are just underneath the window. Is that for a cabinet there?
Yeah. So one of the things that we needed to, look at on this project was any future fixing points, because once the hemp's up and is rendered, we don't really have an opportunity to install any fixing points. So these fixing points that we see here are for some joinery, and we have some others throughout the house for picture, where the clients are going to be hanging pictures. We do have picture rails in some of the bedrooms as well. We also brought forward some fixing points for some walk-in built-in robes into the bedrooms as well.
Thanks, mate. Yeah, and that's essentially it. This is all done at design stage. So we, as you're communicating with the client, these cabinetry and other fitments will be known at that stage, and the builder or ourselves will implement those blocks for fitting. The hempcrete will actually take a screw and will pick up light loads such as a picture frame or even a mirror. But when we're talking about heavy loads, wall cabinets, then yeah, we do need to install fixing points in the wall. So this is where we learned a bunch of stuff working with passive house builders. So this is a ProClimate product that was used on just about all the openings. So you've got the floor meeting the bottom of the wall there. You've got your tape, you've got your black paint, and that the electrical box there is an interesting one to point out too. Normally we run the wall boxes flush with the wall hempcrete finished wall, but in this case, Sanctum really wanted to take it a step further, I guess, in terms of that seal, and so we sat those boxes out about 15 mil proud of the wall. So again, you know, I think the steel shrouds that we use are a real highlight of the aesthetic of this building, and that's the front of the cambia there. And you know, even without a render system, you can see how the contrast between the two materials. But it also the shrouds did make our job easier, apart from the sill. But because, you know, if normally we would box out that window and then remove the formwork, whereas in this case we've got a permanent, you know, sort of structural element there that encases the hempcrete against it, and probably does improve on the seal as well. This is back down on the ground level. I just wanted to sort of point this out because we can have a different external cladding solution on a hempcrete house, and it essentially becomes a case of where the structural frame is set in amongst the depth of the wall. So in this case, the house is going to receive some timber cladding, and this is how the Sanctum boys set up the those metal studs on the outside, are basically fixing points for the timber cladding. And then we've got you know, a good solution there at the base there for as a flashing. So the idea is that, you know, any moisture that does penetrate through, it doesn't get into the house. And that flashing solution would be the same for, you know, any house, but this is how we resolve the flashing and weatherproofing on the external walls. You've got a fibre cement board on the bottom there, an XPS beneath that, and probably a good idea to talk to get you to add a little bit more there, Hamish, about how that was set up and your experience in that process.
So I guess one of the things I'll circle back on to this particular project is that we are going for certified certification from Passive House. So there's a lot of details in this particular home that may or may not be relevant to another hempcrete house. Yes, there's slab edge insulation there behind that mag board there. So it's a magnesium board on the bottom there under that flashing there. And we obviously needed to get that all modelled in the Passive House planning package. So I'm pretty sure that's 100 mil thick XPS foam on the outside. And if you know about Passive House, we have that continuous insulation from under the slab up the side, and then the hempcrete then continues that continuous insulation all around the building. This is an uncoupled slab as well. That's probably a topic or question for another topic, but what we've done here on the corner is on this particular elevation is we've set the timber so they're flush with the finished hempcrete on the outside, so that is still a 300 mil thick wall. We would then wrap that with some more ProClimber products, so ProClimber Extersanus, that's the blue wraps that you've seen on some previous pictures. We'll then put a vertical batten on that to create our air cavity, and then we'll put a horizontal batten on top of that, so we have our ventilated cavity. We'll then clad that just with some normal shiplap cladding. I guess what I loved about this particular junction is that it shows that even though you have hempcrete, you still have an opportunity to create some interest in the project. So we do have some areas which are going to be rendered, but then other areas are going to have the timber cladding on there.
Thanks, Hamish. Yeah, and just adding a little bit more to that is the scheduling. So those walls are fully dried now, and when Hamish was talking about the ProClimber wall wrap that goes above over the top of that, is that we would be looking at certainly the walls to be fully dry before that was you know, fixed on those timber fixing points, purely because we want to encourage as much airflow around that hempcrete to you know, so as it dries accordingly. So that's something that the builder will have to you know, say to us about the scheduling of that. But in this case, Cambia, that worked almost naturally.
I did have a question here, which I'll just answer while I'm on it, Joe. So there was a question here just referring to that flashing detail. Yes, the flashing detail could be considered as a thermal bridge or a thermal break from the continuous insulation. But that particular detail there has all been modelled in PHPP. So you are absolutely correct. It is a thermal bridge, but it has been modelled into the PHPP. So all the details in this project have all been analysed by a third party to make sure that it meets the really strict criteria of Passive House. But this was just a really good way for us to terminate the render. There is a deck which just sits underneath the bottom of that shroud there. It was just a nice way to finish the render, so the render's not actually sitting on top of the deck. It was just a nice way to finish that detail.
Okay. So the cast in situ will always be there for as an option with Hempcrete Building. It's for many reasons. We get probably 50% of our client base are owner builders, and in that sense, that labour input that I was talking about before, you don't need to have a 4-year apprenticeship in installing the hempcrete walls. You do have to have the experience, indeed, and you also importantly need to understand the way the material behaves. Once you've got that, I guess as an owner builder, you can achieve that process. So cast in situ will always be an option for people. But I am encouraged, and I'm really excited about the unique building, exciting new green products that are emerging and coming through. And I just wanted to sort of lightly touch on some of those products. And so here we'll talk about blocks mainly, and we've looked at spray hempcrete. So spray hempcrete is essentially the same material, lime and hemp, and they come through a lance. They've got pressure through 2 different pipes that come through, and the materials meet as they come out of the lance, and the lance is basically the pointy end of the end of a hose, and that's sprayed onto a formwork, either permanent or temporary. We're still a bit uncertain about this particular technology. I just don't know at this stage. I'm not saying anything negative about it. I just don't know whether the thermal performance can be maintained. But I will talk about hempcrete blocks, and when I say blocks, I'm also including small panels. And small panels, I'm talking about, say, 600 in length by about 300 in height, and the thickness can vary from 50 mil to 200 mil. So when we talk about blocks, and look, we're getting quite a bit of interest with blocks in Australia, and I can understand why. It's become a really popular product in Europe, and if we look at Europe as the benchmark, they're probably 30 years ahead of us. And there's now probably about 3 block manufacturers in Europe, and they're literally pumping out these blocks. Now, when we talk about blocks, there's 2 sort of slightly different directions. But with the standard block, like the one you see there, it's quite adaptable. A bricklayer could easily adapt to laying hempcrete blocks. And everything else remains the same. We would still have the structural frame, and the blocks panels would be either on the external wall or the internal wall. The manufacturing process is actually, whilst it is still an expensive exercise, it's not too challenging to put that processing plant together. If you look at a standard house of about, maybe 200 square metres, there's probably upwards of about 800 bricks in that house, you build the same house with about 250 blocks of hempcrete blocks. The other block technology is where there is a hollow core, very similar to the concrete core block that we know in this country. The jury's out on this one. Not everybody is convinced about putting a hollow core where you then have to put essentially a cement slurry and steel reinforcement in those areas, but it is a structural precast block with the reinforcement. And there's a photo of one of those blocks in a house in Europe. The other one that seems to be quite popular at the moment is these sort of thinner panels, which are directly screwed onto the structural frame with a large washer, a rendering washer, which with the wool board that we've got at Cambia, there's the same washers. And then they are finished with a lime-based plaster on the external side, or on the inside you can go with a lime or clay-based render. I mentioned earlier about this whole system approach to hempcrete, to get that optimum thermal and acoustic performance. Hempcrete was always designed as a sandwich where you had a render, in the early days, a render on the outside, render on the inside of the hempcrete wall. These days, we can modify the external cladding and actually clad the external wall with a range of different cladding solutions. But if we talk about lime plaster, which is the old name for it, because the render is actually, for those who are interested in knowing, is actually the base coat. It's the pre-coat before you apply the finish. But the overall process is called plastering. And there you have an old wood lathe there with 3 different render coats on it. So at Cambia at the moment, we've got Kieran Dunleavy, I should say, who's rendering the walls as we speak. He's applied the splash coat. Now he's got the scratch coat on, and when that secondary coat dries, the finish coat is ready to be applied over the top. And so here are 3 hempcrete blocks, which these were provided to Nelson and Mandy, the owners of Cambia. And just not great photos, apologise for that, but it does show the different finishes and textures that we can apply. And I'll finish off by talking about, there is an extraordinary amount of products that we can build with this amazing plant. And I think we're actually only scratching the surface. I can only work in this field of building, and that's really all I'm interested in. But there are so many other applications. If you consider, the original Model T Ford was a basically a hemp carbon fibre body, and in many respects we've gone backwards. But here we have, I'm not sure if the people are familiar with mycelium, which is the root base of mushroom. So we're working with a business at the moment that is buying our hemp and as the base, and the mycelium after a week. There's a process that's involved here, but essentially after about a week, the root structure of the mycelium encases the hemp, and you can use that mycelium for a range of different materials, products. And here we just we can use it for boxing and like products. And then and this is just something we were so incredibly excited about. The powerful owl is verging on being extinct extincted in this country because of loss of habitat. And the Melbourne University, we worked with them to develop there was 4 different types of models to basically replicate the powerful owl nest box. And what you see in that photo is actually a hempcrete nest box. And from what we've been told, it has worked magnificently. And so Melbourne University, with their partners, are actually going to roll these out in the future. And I can send you the link to, it's a really interesting read. For those who are interested, I can provide the link to you at a later point. So at this stage, I'll come back to Hamish and but also open it up to some questions if there are any.
Mate, we've got heaps of questions, tons of questions. So look, I'll just start from the top. I put a shout out on Instagram a couple of days ago and just asked just to get the ball rolling with some questions. So I might try and get through them quickly. I'm just going to throw this one at you, Joe. Can you smoke it?
If you smoke, you'd have to smoke a whole paddock, and I think all would make you very sick. So no,
not the right stuff. Okay.
I'll add to that my former career was actually a police officer, and many years I spent at the drug squad covert surveillance unit, and my former colleagues have an absolute field day with a bunch of jokes, including that one. So thank you.
I'm sure they do. Look, this next question, look, it's a loaded question, I appreciate, but cost per metre squared or metre cubed. Now, this is certainly something that you and I talk about offline. And I guess I'll quickly touch on it from my side, and then Joe, I might throw it over to you as well. We get asked this a lot on our projects, what is it per square metre? And I immediately turn around to clients and say that every home that we build is unique and different and custom. So it's really hard to apply a metre squared rate to any home unless you just want to use it as a very rough guide. So I would say from our side, every project is going to be different. So the cost is driven from the complexities of a project, access, whether it's second story, basement, whatever it is. Joe, do you want to throw anything at that question?
Yeah, look, it's very much in line with what your response is, and that is, I guess to take that a little bit further is, what are you comparing it to? I mean, there are a range of different products out there, cladding solutions from burnt timber these days, char timber, and are you comparing it to a standard volume built brick veneer? In our experience, it does come down to the complexity of the design. I talked about Jane and David's house in Newstead. That was a house of 64 square metres. It was literally a box, 6 windows, 2 doors. Now, the square metre rate there is going to be completely different to the square metre rate at Cambia, which was much higher. But, that's a custom built home and to passive house standard. So
I must admit, sorry to interrupt. I'm really hesitant to talk to people about how much the hempcrete cost at our particular project, because I really don't think it gives a really good yardstick of what you would be expecting to pay on a normal project.
I agree. And I think, if I go back to that scenario I painted before about if you were to build a standard brick veneer house and built the same house out of hempcrete side by side, the hempcrete house is probably going to come in at about 20% more in price. But then you've got to add in there the long-term benefits, the higher thermal performance, and so on.
That comment leads perfectly into this next question. If we can talk about the thermal properties, and I know I was talking to you the other day, Joe, that we actually had a thermal imaging camera on site the other day. But I guess from our learnings with hemp, and if you can expand on it a little bit more, we've got predicted R values, but we've also got thermal mass as well, which is something that other insulating products don't have that hemp does.
Yeah, indeed, and I think like you to come back and tell us about the comment back from the thermal imaging contractor. But look, we with the product that we use for a 300 thick wall, we'll get a thermal resistance value of 4.25, in fact. So that's your thermal resistance. But yeah, as you say, this Hempcrete's got this unique, added attribute that no other. I guess I'd be very hard to find some other product that can provide both, because we understand thermal resistance, your bulk insulation, but when it comes to thermal mass, we generally relate thermal mass to sort of more solid materials such as concrete. So Hempcrete has actually got both, and I'm working with a university to actually establish, because we don't really measure thermal mass in the way that we do thermal resistance. But I guess in simple terms, we get that combination. And thermal mass and the amount of thermal mass in the Hempcrete wall is really relative and works a lot better than a high mass material such as concrete. It'll actually buffer those high and lows much more effectively than solid mass material. So yeah, and I'm interested to hear about the thermal imaging test that we did the other day at Cambia.
So we had Anthony from Outlier Studios come out to have a look at the project because he was really interested at it and brought his thermal imaging camera out. And it was quite interesting watching him shoot at the walls. It was almost he was looking at the camera as if something was broken, because the consistency in the temperature and the lack of thermal bridging that he saw in the walls was something that he had never seen before. And then we went and tested it on, we have another wall in that particular project that has the same R value on paper that the Hempcrete walls have, and that is an R value of 4.2. And that built up as wood fibre, timber stud R2.7, and then we've actually got Intello on the inside. And when you shoot it at that particular wall, you can actually see the thermal bridges everywhere in the studs. Now, when I talk about thermal bridging, it is very, very low compared to like a normal construction or a wall build up, but the hemp was just consistently the same colour. And it was really amazing to see it through that lens to, I guess, really validate, how well these walls actually perform. So I might share some more photos on the Builders Declare Instagram page over the coming weeks. There's a bunch of questions on here, Joe, so I might just keep moving. There is a couple of really good questions here just about the crops of hemp and how long it takes to reach a harvestable size.
So it's considered as a rotation crop, and so again in Victoria with our climate, Victoria and into New South Wales, we're probably looking at two seasons. The Western Murray Land Improvement Group farmers are looking at sowing seeds July, August this year, and hoping to get a crop by the end of the year. So, in summertime, and then at separate farms, they'll put another crop in sort of later earlier in the following year, and get a crop in sort of March, April.
So what's really exciting about this and how quick it grows is how much carbon the hemp crops actually sequester. So, you're talking about a high turnover crop or a high yield crop on a seasonal basis, and you're then capturing or sequestering all that carbon and then throwing it in a wall for insulation, and you're locking that carbon up for the life of that building. Like, for me, that seems like such an amazingly sustainable product that you just don't see on any other building product.
And indeed, and there's a reason why hemp is called a weed because it literally grows like a weed. It's just out of control. I saw that crop a couple of months ago, and I'm now told it's and that was up about my height, about 180 centimetres. That crop is now sitting at about 4.5 metres in the space of 5 weeks. So.
Wow. There's just another quick question that's come through just around, I guess, volume that you would need for a house, and then how much land you would actually need to grow, you know, a house full of hemp. Could you maybe talk a little bit about that in terms of, like,
if we were to build a standard house of, say, 200 square metres, you'd need 15 tonne of hemp. Now, the amount of land that you would need would depend on the crop that you're growing, but yeah, 15 tonne is probably the going rate.
And can you, I guess, explain that in terms of like size of land, or is that a little bit too difficult to?
Yeah, it will depend on the crop itself, but and also, to add to that sequestration that you were talking about, the lime is also known to absorb. It does it on a very slow rate, but over time, it actually is absorbing in the cycle of lime. It is essentially trying to turn back to limestone, and in that process, it is drawing CO2 out of the atmosphere as well.
So what you're saying is it sequesters carbon and then continues to sequester carbon through the life of the building.
That's why it's referred to as a negative CO2 building material.
Yeah, amazing. So here's a question, and I probably can jump in and help you answer this one. So can hemp be applied to the external of a building, timber frame, then rendered as the external cladding system, with the standard timber frame behind it, with a hemp infill, and then a weather-resistant barrier to the external and airtight membrane to the internal with a services cavity?
Trying to understand that, how it sort of...
I could probably answer it because I'm looking at the question. Yep. I guess the challenging thing that we've found, especially with the in situ one, is that you need that structural frame to actually build the hemp around. I think that particular wall build-up would work if you were talking about the hemp panels, like how we set up the wood fibre panels. Yes. Which probably leads on to a question on my side, Joe. Like, are you seeing hemp panels come onto the market? Is that going to be something that's going to be available, like the wood fibre panels that we used on some of the elevations at that particular project?
Yeah, that's whether it's us or whether it's somebody else. I definitely see that as being available in Australia within the next 12, 18 months. I guess the issue we've got here in Australia is we've got a small population, and so an investor is going to look for a return on the investment, and so that's been a little bit tricky. But I think looking at the trends in Europe, there are some backers coming on board, and certainly one of the points of discussion that I'm with Western Murray and the Hemp Building Company is actually a block making facility, which would be which we positioned within that region. So it's a lovely story there about you know, a lot of these townships have really suffered, you know, whether it's drought, whether it's fire, you know, and so there's a lovely story sort of evolving out of that in terms of putting, you know, the similar thing happened with the car manufacturing industry in Geelong when that you know, sort of no more car manufacturing here in Australia. They had to transition into other areas, and so we're working with that concept of trying to look at innovative products that can value add to the crop.
Well, hopefully, you know, more and more people get involved, or hemp becomes more mainstream, so that the investors start looking left and right at it. I will continue with some of these questions, Joe, because there's a few of them. I'm just conscious of the time. There's a question around building permits and how we go about performance solutions. I know with our experience with Cambia, we used a building surveyor that had used it before, but what kind of performance solutions have you had to provide in other projects?
Yeah, we've we talked to the clients very early on, and when we talk about building surveyors, look, most building surveyors get it, they understand it. There are some that don't, I will say, and what they don't get is when we're talking about weatherproofing, they don't understand how a material can be vapor permeable and still provide the weatherproofing. And so when we get to that building permit stage, we assist with providing documentation to the building surveyor. It does help if the building surveyor has worked with it before. However, that's not completely necessary, but it does help. And we find that probably 2 out of 10 building surveyors will need more documentation.
Okay. Now, Joe, you have frozen, so I hope you can still hear us. There is another question here, and I might just get through another couple before we wrap up, because we're almost at 6 o'clock. Can you please explain, if possible, what happens when there is a crack in the external lime-based render regarding moisture egress? Where does the moisture go, and how does it travel through or out of the structure safely? So it looks like I've lost Joe. I will try and answer that one the best as I can. So the hemp itself is water permeable, and the lime render on the outside does allow for moisture to pass through, like in a typical passive house wall build-up with your Intello frame and then your WRB on the outside. There's a couple of questions here around fire resistance as well. Looks like I've got Joe come back on now. Joe, I might get you to unmute yourself for a sec. There is a question here around fire resistance. Would you be able to just quickly touch on that? And then I think we might look at wrapping it up. Well, looks like we've lost Joe. Look, guys, there are
fire resistance.
All right, a couple of technical issues here. I'm sorry, Joe. What we might do is we might wrap it up. I've got a bunch of questions here, which I have copied to a Word document here, and I might see if I can flick them over to Joe over the next coming days and see if I can provide some of these questions. And I might even put it out in an email. There has been a lot of interest here with hemp, which is fantastic. From my personal point of view, it's been a real joy to work with such a product from a sustainability point of view, for a product which we can feel good about using and has a huge amount of potential in the space. And I really want to again thank my clients personally for really championing the use of hemp, because I know that we could have built a home that was a lot more cost effective. I won't say cheaper, but more cost effective if we use a different methodology. But being in the house now and seeing how it performs now that we've got it weather tight, it feels amazing, and so much different to actually other passive houses that we've built. And I can't explain it. Maybe we'll open the house up one day and we can actually get some people to have to come into the house to have a look at it. I am going to wrap it up here. Joe, thank you so much for coming on board today and talking
Pleasure.
about Hempcrete. I feel there's still so much to unpack around Hempcrete. I know this is probably completely off the cuff, but I am going to give your business a bit of a spruik here. Joe is from the Hempcrete Building Company. They're based out in Kyneton. Joe, correct me if I'm wrong, but you do some workshops out there still? Yes or no?
Yeah, we're looking at getting back into, COVID sort of interfered with that, but it has given us time to look at our review our material, and we'll be back bigger and better.
Right.
So yeah, watch this
Awesome.
space. Thank you for the opportunity, Nelson, Mandy, thank you, and Grew and Echo. Cheers.
Awesome. And I will do a quick shout out to Grew and Eco now, and then just wrap it up. So again, thanks so much for Grew and Eco for sponsoring today's webinar. As mentioned, we partnered with Gruen and Joe from the Hemp Build Co on our current project in Viewbank. So one we've been talking about throughout this webinar. You can get in contact with Simone on 043 0389 739. I am going to take the opportunity now to give our podcast a plug. Currently, we have episode 4 and episode 5 out. Episode 4, Simon and Brian, some of the other 2 founding members, catch up with one of our other founding members, Jesse from Glux, and we talk about Jesse's very own boundary pushing certified passive house. Now, this is such an incredible home. I actually live just up the road from it, and I've had the pleasure of actually being through it already. It's an amazing build. Hats off to Jesse for taking it on, because it's an incredible project. That's episode 4. Episode 5, I actually catch up with the guys and we talk about panelised construction and modular construction. So definitely check that out. Our next webinar, we will be joined by Dave Kulstra from Fenster and Panel, where we'll actually talk about SIPs, CLT, HBE, mass timber and panelised construction in general. If you'd like to get in contact with us at Builders Declare, please send us an email at info@buildersdeclare.com. You can jump onto our Facebook page. You can reach out to us at Instagram. Again, thank you so much for everyone coming along tonight, and look forward to seeing you the next one. Catch you later, guys.